Hello, my name is Carolyn Sugiyama Classen, and I'm going to talk today about the passage of the federal legislation to create the National Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. Next, please. My story starts with my father, Francis Sugiyama, who was a US citizen, a Nisei, born in the Trust Territory of Hawaii. In 1941, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, my father was a first-year dental student at the University of Southern California. He was the youngest of 8 children of my immigrant grandparents, who were indentured servants, impoverished people on a Hawaiian sugar plantation on the Big Island of Hawaii. Next, please. USC was racist, and they expelled about 120 Japanese American students. My father fled by train on a voluntary pass given to him by the military authorities, General DeWitt's people. He fled to Chicago, Illinois in 1942. He worked there for a year and a half as a postal clerk and took classes at Loyola University. I found out later that only 500 such voluntary passes were given, and the rest of the Japanese Americans, as most of you know, were sent to the 10 large internment camps. Next, please. Fortunately, my father he persevered, and he was readmitted to the University of Maryland Dental School in Baltimore. He completed his studies in 1945 and returned to the Trust Territory of Hawaii. He met my mother and had us 3 children. I grew up hearing this story, went on to Boston College Law School as a sansei, and then I became a legislative aide to US Senator Dan Inouye. He was Hawaii's senior senator. He became Hawaii's first congressman in 1959 at statehood, and then US Senator in 1963. Next, please. Dan Inouye was a relative. He had married my first cousin Maggie in 1948, before I was even born. I mentioned that my father was the youngest of 8 immigrant children of immigrants. And so my father's older sister, Omitsu, was Maggie's mother. And she was Mitsu Sugiyama Aramura, living in Honolulu. And she had 6 daughters, and Maggie was one of the 6 daughters. Next, please. So as a sansei attorney, working for US Senator Dan Inouye, I was now in charge of civil rights. And at that time, in 1979, National JACL already wanted monetary reparation. But Senator Inouye said no, he couldn't pass that kind of legislation at the time. So he proposed creating a national commission to investigate the wrong. The other US Senator, Sparky Matsunaga, and the 2 Japanese American congressmen at the time, just Norm Mineta and Bob Matsui, agreed. But the US Senator S.I. Hayakawa did not agree. And that was part of the trouble we had. So it was my job to draft the bill, and I decided to make it as neutral as possible because I didn't want to alert people that we were creating a commission to investigate what happened against Japanese Americans. So I called it the Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, because I knew these were not military people, these were not prisoners of war, these were civilians. And so you can see the title was quite odd, but neutral. This legislation became Senate Bill 1647, and that's when I had to start working for passage of this bill from the inside. Next, please. So, as you know, 10 large relocation centers were created across America. 2 were in Arizona at Poston and at Gila River. About 120,000 Japanese Americans were interned. 2/3 were US citizens, and 1/4 were children. Executive Order 9066, which promulgated this action, was applied only to Japanese Americans, not German or Italian Americans. So this was the civil rights issue that I was fighting for, because people lost their lives, liberty, and justice without due process of law. There were no hearings, no charges were brought against the Japanese Americans who were put into these 10 large camps. Next, please. So as I said, S-1647 was introduced also on the House, there was a House version. So the immense nationwide job of lobbying for passage of the bill fell on my back, and as well as national JACL. So I decided to start organizing civil rights groups, Japanese, Asian groups, veterans groups, in particularly the states where the camps had been, because those were the states where people were the most interested in seeing that justice was done. And they had known, some of these people had known about the camps. So this legislation passed the US House first, it passed Congress first, but it was stalled in the Senate. So it took a while, but eventually 1.5 years after we introduced it, we were able to create this National Commission. Next, please. So President Jimmy Carter signed the bill in 1980, Public Law 96317, and Senator Inouye sent me this picture of the signing. There's a handwritten note on the bottom. It says, "For Carolyn Sugiyama, this was your day. With much affection and gratitude, aloha, Daniel K. Inouye," because he knew how obsessed I was in passage of this bill. I mean, I was obsessed. I knew I was never going to leave his office until I got that bill passed. And I did. It was rough because there was a lot of racism at the time already. Lots of people on the Congress side kept telling me, "Oh, this bill is not worth it. It'll never pass. We don't have the money." And some of them even tried to get me fired. Next, please. So the commission was created. He went out for 2 years, holding public hearings across America, mostly in the states where the camps had been. And then 2 years later, they issued a report called Personal Justice Denied. And that's my worn copy of the commission's report. Next, please. Okay, so this is what the key page is, page 18, in which the commission says, quote, "The promulgation of Executive Order 9066 was not justified by military necessity. The broad historical causes which shaped these decisions were race prejudice, war hysteria, and failure of political leadership. A grave injustice was done to American citizens and resident aliens of Japanese ancestry." Next, please. So based on this report, JACL National continued to push for redress for $20,000 per internee for many years, but many had already died, as you know. Most of you know this. Issei and Nisei had already passed by 1988, when finally President Ronald Reagan issued a public apology and signed legislation for redress, which is the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. And you can see my boss, Dan Inouye, standing there as well, with Congressman Bob Matsui. Next, please. So moving on, in 2020, I just want to say that I won an outstanding haiku at the Arizona Matsuri in Phoenix. And there it is, a copy of my outstanding haiku: "Strong Issei people jailed in camps in the desert, shikata ga nai." And as you know, that's the phrase that was said after these camps, in which people, Japanese Americans, humbly returned from the camps and relocated. After 3 years, many of them just tried to move on. Next, please. My father's personal justice denied was remedied 80 years later on April 1st, 2022 by the University of Southern California. We had not heard from them at all since they expelled my father in 1942. So USC apologized and conferred an honorary degree on him at a USC Asian Pacific Alumni Association Scholarship and Awards Gala in Pasadena, California. This was a posthumous award as my father as a Nisei died in May 1966 at age 81. And I had asked him if he wanted me as a Sansei attorney to go after USC for some kind of redress or some kind of apology. And he had told me before he died, no, he did not want anything. So it's kind of ironic that, he got this degree. Next, please. And here it is, a copy of his honorary bachelor's degree that was awarded in the spring of, it says spring 2022, and it's signed by the president, Carol Holt, whom we all met her in Los Angeles on April 1st of this year. Next, please. USC also created a beautiful tribute rock garden. The landscape architect was Calvin Abe, whose parents were interned. So that was actually very moving to meet him. And this is for the 120 Nisei students who had been expelled in 1942. In 2012, USC had given 11 honorary degrees to those Nisei who were still alive, but they had refused in 2012 to give posthumous degrees until 2022. So it took them 10 years to change their minds and to create this rock garden. And the stone there is a memorial for the 3 years that many people suffered in the camps. Next, please. So that's my talk today. And I like to say just thank you for listening. And because this is the 80th year of the anniversary of Executive Order 9066, I'd like just to say, let's not forget what happened in the past so that we make sure this doesn't happen to another ethnic group in America. There's my contact information. I'm the editor of the Southern Arizona Japanese Cultural Coalition. 9 years now, we were created to organize and advocate for Japanese activities and causes down here in Southern Arizona. That's our website, southernazjapan.org, and my contact information. So thank you very much again, and let's just reconcile. I mean, I'm saying that I'm entitling a talk like this as Personal Justice Reconciled because it is a reconciliation for my father and perhaps a lot of the others who were interned and hurt by our US government on US soil. Thank you.